Welcome, Michael Jackson fans. Today we're going to take an in-depth look at Michael Jackson hand signs and some musical theory. Welcome, Michael Jackson fans. So today is going to be something very, very, very different, and it's going to be a little bit longer than usual. So Michael Jackson fans, welcome. And if you're not a Michael Jackson fan, welcome to you as well. Okay, I need to preface this with a couple of things. Number one, if you are a Michael Jackson fan, you may very well want to miss this video. And the reason for that is because you may find it boring. We're going to be taking an in-depth look at music, scale, mode, some theological subjects, and you might just find it boring. Not many people are interested in these subjects. So you might want to go to my blog and basically take a little preview of it, and then you can pick out, what you like that way. I feel like I'm going to be speaking for a while today. You also might want to know that we are going to be covering some Michael Jackson subjects in detail, but we're also going to take a look at some other artists, and basically we're going to move off because you need to have a wide perspective when looking at certain things. You can't just give quick answers to complicated questions, which is why, I can give you the quick answer now, and then you can, it's all good. You don't need to hear the explanation, but some people are interested in this kind of thing. So stay with me if you're interested and curious about theological subjects, philosophical subjects, maybe, a little bit of religious subjects, a little bit of art, history, then stay with me. But if it's strictly Michael Jackson you're interested in, go to the blog, skip this video. We've got some great videos coming up this month. We've got the Michael Jackson crane claps, and I'm going to do an in-depth article on that. I've got so much more. Also, if this is your first video that you're watching on my Michael Jackson vlog, then stop now, go and watch all of the rest, and then come back to this one, because this is different. We're going to do something very different today. Okay, so just so you recap, in all of this wealth of information today, I'm going to include a little bit about Michael Jackson specifics, including Michael Jackson in Las Vegas and his art, including Brad Buxer, Stranger in Moscow, some chord, interesting things about the chords, scale and mode in relation to Michael Jackson, and dangerous album cover symbolism, and stuff like that. We're going to cover a few things. So they're the specific Michael Jackson things I'm going to cover today, but we are going to open out. Okay, enough of that. Here goes. Okay, it's important that I mention this before I start, that anything I say today is for illustrative purposes only. I do not endorse any particular religion, any particular belief, or even a character that I may talk about today. I'm talking about it for illustrative purposes only and given my unique perspective. So just bear that in mind. If I quote somebody or I mention somebody, that doesn't mean that I endorse them or say that they're great or say that they're wrong. It's just a case of illustration only. So please bear that in mind. Without much further ado, let's get on with it. Oh, another thing. I'm very aware of the difference between allegory, myth, legend, story, reality, symbolism. So again, if I say a story, I'm not saying take it literally necessarily. Maybe it is up to you whether you decide whether it is real or not, or whether there's a deeper meaning that you can take value from. That's totally up to you. A lot of these subjects, it's up to you. It's how it touches you, and so whatever you feel can sometimes be right. However, with Michael Jackson, a lot of people say a lot of things, and I'm shocked to read that hundreds of thousands of people have been watching videos about Michael Jackson being a Satanist, Michael Jackson doing Illuminati hand signs, Michael Jackson symbolism in the cover, and that he's an occultist, and it's pretty crazy actually. I say crazy, but let me say this. I don't think, just because somebody has a different view to me, I do not perceive them as crazy, even if they are wrong. I see them as lazy, or they're uneducated, or they haven't informed themselves of the facts. So just because someone has a different view to me, I don't call them crazy. However, some of the theories are pretty wild and pretty crazy, and actually there's no evidence at all to support them. And today I want to take a closer look at that, because if you don't know the facts about something, it's very easy to believe what someone says. And a lot of times people really do talk nonsense. I've had a lot of people speak to me over the years about, like, I'll be at a party and several times, oh, what do you think about Michael Jackson being alive? I think he's alive. And obviously Michael Jackson is dead. And this is something which maybe like spreads across the internet. And it always has. This is not something new. Elvis Presley, Jimi Hendrix. So it's not something new. It's just people have a wild imagination sometimes and they really want to attach to something. But another thing is about Michael Jackson's mudras and Illuminati hand signs. I think this really is ignorance, because people that say, a lot of people have said that online, and a lot of people have read about it and watched videos, and I have to say right now that Michael Jackson is not doing mudras at all. He is not doing Illuminati hand signs at all, and today I'm going to give you my perspective on why he isn't. Now, I think I have a unique perspective, because I know Michael Jackson, I know the subject very well, but I also have experience in history, classical history, religion, theology. I also have the experience of being a Freemason as well from the other side, so I can see things and I can explain them in a way which is understandable without all the craziness that goes along with it, and that's what I'm going to do today. We're going to take a look at specifics with detail and reasons. And the most important thing is, when you're looking at something like Michael Jackson, what he's doing is context and intention. Without those two things, you cannot jump to conclusions about what you are seeing, especially if you're saying that, for example, Michael Jackson is doing a hand sign which represents something. Now, number one, a hand sign, obviously, it needs to convey a message. A conveying of a message needs a recipient. So what you're saying is that Michael Jackson is passing on a message to somebody. Now, if you have no evidence to support that, you don't know his intention, and you don't have the context, then it's very difficult for anybody to say that. And now, specifically, for example, with mudras. Now, in Earth Song, Michael Jackson performs hand signals through the song. To be honest, I'm even surprised that people even noticed that. I was quite impressed to see that some people are observant. However, they miss the mark when they attribute things to those movements which are not true. So Michael Jackson does so many hand movements in his career. They do mean something. Claw, this. So many. You don't think you can see if I do some like this. There's so many. All right, so let's take a look at a little bit of these things, or this. Let's take a little look and jump right in. Misinterpretation. So Michael Jackson in Jam, bam, he'll take off his glasses, but his hands will create this shape. Now, some people actually believe that that is Michael Jackson doing an Illuminati hand sign, which is pretty crazy, but they don't know the performance. Michael Jackson is in Jam, he has his dancers behind him, they take off their sunglasses, but Michael doesn't have sunglasses, so he mimes taking off his sunglasses, and that's when the picture is taken. That's supposedly a 666, whatever. Now, you know that when you take off your sunglasses, you'll take them off like this or like this, and that's it. Now you have context. Now you know that all he was doing a dance move, taking off his glasses. So that little bit of information unlocks the truth about that photograph. It's not an Illuminati hand sign. He's just miming taking off his glasses. With anything in art, this is about show business. It is about mystery. Michael Jackson was all about mystery, all about eliciting a response out of you which is mysterious. That was his whole life. I was speaking to his bodyguard, and literally everything in his life was about, okay, he'll put the mask on when he goes out, and his bodyguard starts, well, why are you putting that on? And it's like, oh, it's for the mystery. It's, it's entertainment. And people forget this. This is entertainment. So you asking a question about why he is doing something or doing a hand sign is good. It's part of it. That is entertainment. That's the whole point of it. It is something beyond you that touches you. And that's why asking these questions isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's when you jump to conclusions and you make statements of fact, that's when it gets a bit off. And a lot of people say a lot of crazy things, and sometimes it's rude, sometimes it's just impolite to say something about somebody when you don't know the facts. And it's so, people don't know the facts, they really don't, they haven't done their research. And if you do, then things will become a little bit clearer. So let's do a little bit of research today. A lot of Michael Jackson's hand movements he borrowed from Bob Fosse, the very famous choreographer. Because the bottom line is this: if you have a line, sometimes it looks more aesthetically pleasing to end it with a point. And Bob Fosse knew that, Michael Jackson knew that. It is just a case of movement and aesthetic, and how that movement and aesthetic affects you as the observer. That is the whole point of art. Michael Jackson was an expert manipulator in music, sound, and movement. In other words, sound, in other words, vibration. He was an expert in this. It was his job to be an expert. You don't become the biggest star in the world in his vocation of movement, of voice, of sound, of vibration, without knowing what you're doing and how to manipulate people's emotions and affect them. But Michael Jackson wasn't the first. Every great artist understands this. The ancients understood this process, vibration and the power of sound and the power of movement. Well, everything is vibration at the end of the day. But the ancients really did understand that. So it's a long line. Some things in Michael Jackson's songs, techniques, they're really from ancient Greece or before, they really are, because everything is just a progression. So if you have an understanding of what he's doing, then you can kind of see what he's doing. It's not a mystery. And that's the thing about education. If you educate yourself, you will know what you are seeing. Now, it's only a mystery when you don't know. That's the key. When you don't know, it's a mystery. But if you know what you're seeing, it's not a mystery. All right, let's relate some Michael Jackson songs to an ancient technique. Let's talk about mode and scale. Now, the ancient Greeks made the modes and scale, the church modes, famous. And what they are, they're modes of music. Now, you know them, you've heard some of them before, like Ionian, which is today's major scale, Locrian, Lydian, Mixed Lydian, Aeolian, loads, 7 main ones, but there's so many more. And they all touch you in a certain type of way. Now, Michael Jackson knew this. Every artist, every musician knows this, how to touch you with a note. And the ancients believed that this was very, very powerful. The Greeks are probably the most famous. So, for example, the Ionian scale, what we now know as the major scale, that's the Ionian Islands. That's where that came from on this side of Greece, if I'm doing the weatherman, on this side of Greece. But they didn't actually discover them because I've read the Druids. They believed that their harps were tuned to the sounds of the planets. It's just that the Greeks wrote it down. They wrote down the form, especially Pythagoras, and that's why it's named Phrygian scale. Phrygia was a location in Greece, now Turkey, and Phrygians and Dorians were a group of people. The Dorians actually were followers of Pythagoras. Now, Pythagoras you might know from mathematics, but he was actually an expert in sound and tone, theology, philosophy. Pythagoras was actually probably the first person that used the word philosopher in search of the truth. He was the first person to use that. And his followers were called Dorians. It's very, very interesting. However, let's bring that form of scale and mode to Michael Jackson right now. So, Michael Jackson, Dorian mode. Some of his songs are in the Dorian mode, and like Earth Song, Billie Jean, Thriller. And that's just what notes he's using to create the song. Now, I know that he didn't write Thriller. Rod Temperton wrote Thriller. However, all of the greats, they know how to manipulate sound. And so think about it this way. Maybe you have a particular mode and scale that you like, and songs in that scale you find yourself attracted to. Isn't that interesting? But because you don't have musical theory or knowledge, technically, you might not know why you like the song. So if we list Michael Jackson's songs, then there's techniques in there that you might be attracted to. So again, Billie Jean, Dorian, Earth Song, Dorian, and Thriller, and you know what? It's funny, if you listen to compare Billie Jean and Earth Song, the chords, you're going to see similarities there as well. But Michael Jackson knew the power, and any great composer knows the power of these sounds on you and how they vibrate with you. And you know this as well. For example, at a very simplistic level, you know that in a minor key, that it sounds sad. In a major Ionian, that it sounds happy. So you know this on a simplistic level, but the bottom line is this, you still know this. So it's a manipulating of sound through song to have an effect on you. So maybe you like certain songs and certain scales. I love the Phrygian scale. I told you about Phrygia earlier, and it touches me in a certain way. It's ancient and it takes you back. So we all have our favourites, so that'd be interesting. I haven't done any research into it, so I wouldn't know, but I'm sure that there's people that like certain scales. You are attracted to certain songs in that scale. It's very, very interesting if you think about it, actually. You know, with something like the Dorian scale, musical people, you know, first, second, flattened third, fourth, fifth, flattened sixth. It's just basically whole tones and semitones. Whole tone, semitone, whole tone, whole tone, semitone. The Dorian scale, according to the ancients, was associated with water. So Pythagoras and his followers actually listened to that kind of music in the morning to cleanse. Really, really interesting when you take a look at music at a deeper level, especially if you look at it from the legends and ancient history. Is it true? That's for you to say. But all we do know, what is true, is that music has certain different effects when you're tired or when you are angry. It can get you angry, it can calm you down. And Pythagoras knew about the effects of this deeply, and so did Plato. Plato is another one. About 2,500 years ago, he wrote a book called The Republic. It's a collection of 10 short books in one. And by the way, these people are important because Western civilization is basically based on the thoughts and the writings of these people. You know about these. You might not know specifically about these people, but the way that you live your life and the culture that you live in is based on the thoughts of some of these people. So Plato was very adamant about sounds and modes, that you shouldn't mix modes within a song, because he believed that it could literally destroy, that certain music could destroy the fabric of society. He believed that, for example, the two scales that he approved was the Dorian and the Phrygian. He believed that, that for peaceful people, that they should listen to only music within those tones, but not Ionian, because he felt that was I think he mentioned sloth and sleepiness, if I remember. So that's our scale, by the way, that we mostly use today, the Ionian scale, the major scale. So it's quite funny what he had to say about that. So if you find yourself, feeling a little bit out of it, maybe it's because the music you listen to, you never know. Anyway, if you go to church and you hear the bass tones and you hear the chords and the scales, it puts you in a meditative state. That's the power of music. And so the same with chants. Certain chants put you in a certain meditative state so that you can be open to whatever you like to call it. Spirit, God, peace, whatever is your thing. And that's why they would meditate. Who knows, maybe the sound correlates with your heart rate, your brain frequency, I don't know. But there's something there which affects the body. And that is music, and that is sound and vibration. So Pythagoras, he wasn't just a mathematician that you might have heard of. He was a physicist, musician, astrologist. They didn't differentiate between the arts and science and music and sound in those days. They knew that you had to absorb it all so that you can basically enlighten yourself, and they understood this. Nowadays, we separate everything. I don't agree with that. I think that we should really... I'm really bad at math, so I find it really, really hard. I love Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci was an amazing man. He wasn't just a painter. He was an inventor. He could sing. He could dance. He was funny. He was the life of the party. These people, they're polymaths. They're geniuses, basically, and they looked at all things. And it's important, I think. Pythagoras told of a story we read where there was an agitated man and he was going to kill somebody, and basically he realized that there was a tone being played, and he asked them to change the mode, and that changing of the mode calmed down the person, so he saved somebody's life. And there's quite a lot of stories like that in the reference works about examples where music saved people's lives and changed people's perceptions. I mean, even if you're a Christian and you look to the Bible, you'll understand that I think Joshua 6, walls of Jericho, they came down for a reason. Sound. And sound has power. It touches you and it vibrates you. We're all vibration. It's important to remember that. And we all know that deep down. So let's move on. Okay, so how would Michael Jackson use scale and tone in his songs to affect you? And let's take a little look at some compositions. We've looked at, very briefly, Billie Jean, Earth Song and Thriller. And let's take a look at Michael's way of composition. Now, he's talked about it in his deposition in Mexico. He talked about how he composes, and he literally sings the notes. And then from that, he gives it to the musicians, and then the song comes from that way. So it's interesting to note that Michael Jackson was not a polyphonic overtone singer, which means that he could only sing one note at a time. By the way, just so you know that what an overtone singer is, it's somebody that can sing more than one note at a time, usually two. And basically, like the Mongolian throat singers, and there's some other amazing people that can do it. But Michael Jackson was not one of those. So what that means is that if Michael Jackson can only sing one note and the chord is a triad and has three notes, that somebody, either Michael Jackson or the composer, will have to create the chord around that note, obviously. Because if you didn't play the piano, you're going to get the closest chord to the sound, but you're going to have to build the other notes around that note. Because if you can only sing one note, then you don't have a chord, you have a note. Every single musician, a real professional, world-class musician, understands about tone and scale. They would have studied it. They know it expertly. So let's come to a Michael Jackson example. Stranger in Moscow. Stranger in Moscow is an amazing song. It's probably one of my favorite songs. And we were looking at it a few years ago with Francesc and Natalie. And Natalie, to this day, she sings with me in my show. And we were playing the piano and singing. And I played a chord. And Francesc, who's a genius in music and maths, said, "That's wrong." And I'm like, "No, that's not wrong." He said, "Yes, it is wrong." And then he showed me the chord in Stranger in Moscow. And I think it was F sharp minor seventh, I think. F sharp minor, yes. When you're alone and you chord inside, that chord there, when you're alone and you chord inside. And he started laughing, and he laughed, and he said, "Michael Jackson didn't compose that chord." And I went, "Well, yes, he did." And he said, "No, he didn't." And I didn't really understand what that meant, but now I do understand. You can identify, you can forensically look at the music, and you can know what Michael came up with and what Michael didn't come up with, or who he collaborated with, and how the song was constructed by listening to the chords, or just reading the chords on the sheet music, like Billie Jean and Earth Song. We talked about those being in the same scale. But Stranger in Moscow, we now know about Brad Buxer, and Brad Buxer's massive contribution to Stranger in Moscow. And obviously that chord was from somebody who understood structure of music, 100%. That's not to say Michael Jackson didn't compose it, he did compose it. But those chords, as I've stated previously, Michael Jackson sang it. Michael Jackson, he doesn't sing a chord, he sings a note. So that chord probably came from Brad Buxer, because you can just hear you need to be an expert to come up with that chord. I mean, it's just, I think the discussion we were having, it wasn't the logical chord. You know, a simplistic way, I would have not come up with that chord. Somebody who doesn't have musical expertise probably wouldn't have come up with that chord. And so, I mean, even if you listen to Thriller and a lot of Rod Temperton's work, Sweet Freedom, one of my favourite songs, I saw that performed by Michael McDonald in America, in Florida a few years ago. Beautiful song, one of my favourite songs. Thriller, Boogie Nights, Heat Wave, real musical theory knowledge, and you can see him through the songs. You can just see, just by technique, there is pattern there, there is secrets there that can be encoded, but only if you have the knowledge. But again, does it matter? Maybe not. It's a beautiful song, and that's that. Another thing is the difference between a note and a sound. What is the difference between, for example, a hammer hitting a nail and a E? You know, what is the difference? I would argue that there's no difference. It's just a sound. It's just a vibration. Everything is. One of my favourite artists is Jean-Michel Jarre, and he talks about this a lot. What is the difference? Michael Jackson knew this difference. He didn't differentiate. In the beginning of Stranger in Moscow, you have rain falling down, the sound of raindrops. He did that for a reason. He did that to put you in an emotive state so you would be prepared for the song. And he did it throughout his whole career with interludes with classical music, and he just intersliced classical music in at certain times. He was a master at manipulating emotion through music and sound. And it's very interesting if you take a look at it. Okay, let's totally switch tracks from musical theory in Michael Jackson to Michael Jackson hand signs. Okay, I'm going to illustrate how foolish the idea that Michael Jackson was a Satanist and Illuminati hand sign is right now by giving another example. And that word, and that example is the word abracadabra. It is a word, but it's an incantation. It's a special word with meaning, abracadabra. Now, you've probably seen every magician that you've ever seen say that word on stage, abracadabra. And just like a musician, a magician is an entertainer, and in show business, they say that word for effect. They don't necessarily know what it means. So you wouldn't say that magician is an occultist, for example, because they've just used that word. No, you wouldn't. It's preposterous. Because they've used it for like an aesthetic reason. They've used it because it sounds mysterious. Maybe it touches you in a certain way. Do you know what? Let's take a look at the word abracadabra. So the word abracadabra, some say it comes from around 1750 years ago in the Roman times. And it's not just a word. Now, what it was this. If you were sick, 1750 years ago, you were sick. What they would do is you would take the word abracadabra, write it down, and then you would write it down repeatedly and take one letter off each time. And you do this to create an inverted pyramid, upside down. And you do this on a piece of paper. You'd wrap it up. You'd put it in a necklace, a charm, like a talisman thing. You'd put it on somewhere. You'd wear it for 9 days. And then, on the 9th day, you'd take it off. You'd throw it over your left shoulder along the stream of an east-flowing river, and that supposedly would give you protection and you wouldn't get ill. So they believed that there was power in the word. Now, again, you wouldn't be saying that magician on stage, oh, look at him, he wouldn't know that at all. Of course he wouldn't. In fact, the word probably goes back a lot further than then. I've read about the word being associated with the constellation Taurus a very, very long time ago. However, not relevant, who cares? Like, the point I'm making still stands. That word is used by entertainers. Do they really know what it means? It just sounds cool. A lot of things literally just sound cool, look cool, and that's why they did it. I mean, you have to know a little bit about it, about the things, because then it's not mysterious. So abracadabra went on to abrahadabra. Yes, it goes back, all of these words. In 1904, the occultist Aleister Crowley was in Egypt, in Cairo. A couple of days before, he was apparently in the Great Pyramid, and a spirit came to him and told him to go to a certain place in Cairo, and between midday and 1 p.m. a spirit would come to him. So he went to the place, and at midday a spirit called Awas came to him and gave him the book of the law. And it's kind of a strange book. It's got lots of interesting, weird things in it. But he was given the word abrahadabra, so it was changed, and that had a totally different meaning. So I'm not endorsing Aleister Crowley in any way. I'm just telling you that a lot of these words do have history, but they're not relevant to the entertainers that used them. Some of those songs sound really emotional, like Man in the Mirror. There's a parallel key modulation change there, semitone, I think semitone, with the choir. This is why they touch you emotionally. Black or White also has one. Remember I told you earlier about Plato? He was like, if you do that, it has an effect on you. So bottom line is this: whatever meaning you ascribe to the thing is irrelevant. It has an effect, and some people love those. It touches you, and that's why the artists do them, literally for that reason. The history behind it is not so relevant, but some people confuse that history with other things. Now, talking about other things, let's move on to hand signs, specifically mudras. So if you watch Michael Jackson in Earth Song in Brunei in the royal concert, you will see Michael Jackson doing hand signs. Again, I say that in quotation marks. They're not hand signs. I told you before, you need to intentionally pass on a message with the recipient to do a hand sign. If he was not doing hand sign, he was doing hand gestures and hand movements, similar to, as I said earlier, with abracadabra. Now, okay, let's take a look at what mudras are. So fans online have actually been pointing out that Michael Jackson was doing mudras in that song. Well, he wasn't, because you don't, with respect, probably have any knowledge of what you speak. So I'm sure you don't even know what a mudra is, or what, if he is, you can tell us what mudra he is doing. So let me tell you what a mudra is. A mudra is a hand sign, but also it encompasses the whole body. But let's just say a hand sign, Buddhists, ancient Buddhism, Indian cultures, in the yogic system, they all use mudras because it's almost to have a balancing effect on the body and to direct energy. You might see monks. It directs energy in certain ways. Now, they understood, some gurus even say that it's like a keyboard accessing you and your inner system. And that's why when you meditate, for example, you might put your hands on your lap and put your hands in a certain position because it directs energy. Also, when you meditate, you might put your legs in the lotus position to hold yourself in balance, or to direct energy within a circuit around you. It creates circuit. With mudras, you air, fire, and then you link up at certain things depending on what you want to achieve. Now, Michael Jackson wasn't doing mudras. It's simple as that. The closest, Madonna does do mudras in her art, 100%, because you can see that she's doing them. She's doing them correctly. She's doing them clearly, and there's a context of culture. For example, she might be wearing Indian clothes, for example, and then she's doing a mudra, obviously. But Michael Jackson, that's not the case. If you look at Earth Song, you may see something which looks like a mudra. There's a Mayura mudra, which is essentially this. Hopefully you can see. But if you watch Michael is doing something different. He's twisting like this. The finger's wrong. One time he does it with this finger. The next minute he does it with this finger. And also, most importantly, his fingers aren't straight. So straight away, it's not a mudra. It's a hand position. Simple as that. He did it to have an effect on you. So if you're asking this question, what's he doing, then that's why he did it. For that, it's just a beautiful hand gesture, which is why he did it. But specifically, you can't say it was a mudra because it wasn't a mudra. You need to be specific. Like, if it was, what was it? I've never seen a mudra doing in any hand sign that Michael Jackson done in Brunei and Earth Song. I really haven't. So, but if you don't know what a mudra is, then you wouldn't know that, and you just say, "Oh, yeah, he was doing that." Well, he wasn't. Madonna, on the other hand, yes, she She really did. So, all right, let's move on. I mentioned before that intention and context are key in everything in life, but especially with performance. A lot of the things really are just aesthetics. They really are. They look good, end of story. They were borrowed from a culture, from a system, from a religion, from whatever. That's the reason why they do it. Many artists, that's what they do. And it's not really mystery behind it. If you're ignorant about the symbols and you're ignorant about it, then you might not get it, and it will be mysterious. I'll give you an example. I was in the Victoria and Albert Museum a few years ago, and I was standing on the balcony looking down, and there was what looked like, in the centre, a kind of party. And I was just leaning over the balcony and just watching, and I was waiting for a friend. And it looked very beautiful. It was strange. It had such a strange energy. And I was like, oh, that's really, they all had their drinks, and it was all bustling, and it was quite amazing. But then I thought, but there's something strange about this. I don't know what it is. And then I looked closer, and then I realized what it was. Everybody there was deaf. They were doing sign language to each other. It touched me. I just appreciated the aesthetic beauty of what they were doing and the vibration and the spirit of the occasion. But because I was from afar looking down, it's only then I realised, wait a minute, it's almost silent. I think that gives an illustration of my interpretation of it. I could look at that and be like, what are they doing with their hands? I mean, what does this mean? And I could interpret it in many ways, but I don't know sign language. I don't know what they were saying because I'm on the other side. And I remember I saw a hand movement and I was like, you know what, I could put that in a dance routine. So the point that I'm making with that is, if you don't understand the language, you don't understand the language. That doesn't mean it's mysterious. They understand it. They were communicating with each other. So their hand signs, again, they are hand signs in the real sense. They were passing on a piece of information to a recipient. That's a hand sign. And so not what Michael Jackson is doing. So let's play devil's advocate a little bit. So you're saying that Michael Jackson is, Illuminati, blah, 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 blah. Let's say, okay, that means he has an understanding, a deep understanding of what he does, obviously. But we need to talk a little bit about, if that is the case, that he would understand that you need to have protective measures in place. And he would understand what he was doing symbolically. For example, is he doing something to invoke a spirit? Or is it some kind of worship, like a lot of people say it is? It's crazy. Actually, I retract that. It's ignorance. That's what it is. So let's just say Satanism. Satanism is just a catch-all phrase for something you perceive as evil or dark. But so if you use that phrase straight away, it's a case of you probably don't know what you're talking about. You probably really don't know what you're talking about, and you've probably just heard it, someone else say it, and that's your definition. If someone is going to worship Satan, and this guy is really evil, and they would make sure that they are protected. Clothes, black, clean, washed. They wouldn't just be doing a hand sign to the devil during dangerous. It doesn't happen like that. Every person with knowledge in that area knows that you need to protect yourself using maybe a magic circle, using many, many, many means, because it can have a psychological effect on your life. And it can have a real effect on your life. So in the 16th century, there was an astrologer and a magician called Johann Faust. F-R-A-U-S-T. Yeah, Johann Faust. And he used to go around basically doing magic tricks. One time he had in the market, he just threw a sheet on some eggs and they hatched. All these legends and all these stories about what he did. But in the end, in the end, the legend goes, the story goes that he was ripped apart by the devil and blasted up against the wall. Some people always said that he ended up with a knife in his back as well. Oh, by the way, this is not Goethe's Dr. Faust. This is not Johann Goethe's. I'm not talking, this is about the real man. But the point is that they had to have protective measures in place because they understood the occultic power behind it. Real or not real, that's not the point. If they believed it, they understood. Now, I think that if I remember rightly, I think he invoked a spirit called Aesiel, 3 foot, about 3 foot high, and if you want a spirit to go and get money for you, that was the one in those days. But in the end, the story goes that he was ripped apart by Satan, by the devil, and the point is though that once they have given their power over to a spirit, there is nothing left for them in the afterlife. So they will do everything they can to prolong their life. You might have to read between the lines of what I'm saying here. So just think about that. They will do everything they can. So if they are involved in Satanism seriously and they've invoked spirits, there's nonsense about Bob Dylan as well. Yes, fine. But there is certain things that you need to do. And if you are an expert to an extent where you worship one of these deities and you're doing signs, you will know that there is a context and a respectful, reverent way to do these things, from mudras to whatever hand signals. There's context. You do them in certain times, you say certain things, and you do them for specific reasons, and you need to be dressed in a certain way. There's an ancient festival in the Roman times called Saturnalia, and it was celebrated on the 17th of December onwards. And let's just say you were going to do a ritual. You might need to get your coins, oats, oils. Most importantly, you need to be standing on the earth, the mud. You need that earth, and if you can't stand in the mud, you need to get some earth. My point is, if you do these rituals, if you know what you're doing, you would know to do these things properly, because you know if you don't put those precautions in place, you would pay for it by, maybe demonic possession, they would say. I've read about, even artists in the 70s, drugs and, Ouija boards, and it blew their mind. So it all depends what your perspective is on it. It doesn't really matter if it's literal or not, it does affect. But if you take it seriously and you say that somebody did that, then they would take it seriously. And so they wouldn't just do it willy-nilly to you. Why would they do it to you? It makes no sense. And again, they wouldn't do it in the context of a performance. It wouldn't work like that. That's not how it works. They may do it for aesthetical reasons or just for mysterious reasons, but it wouldn't be to impart anything to you. So just because there's a bastardization of the thing and you see that, doesn't mean they have any knowledge of the original thing. Like yoga, for example. If you speak to the yoga, obviously you know about yoga, it's around the whole world, but there's a yogic system in India, and it actually went back to which god was it? Vishnu? It went back to a god who had 7 followers, and this system was passed on all around the plane. Now, what's happened is that people have a certificate and then they're now experts in yoga. But if you speak to an expert in India, for example, they will laugh. They will say that they understand the power of yoga and meditation, and they, for example, warn, some of them do, don't have a mirror nearby. Don't talk when you're doing some of the asana poses, for example. Don't play music, because they say the side effects to these when you do those things. So the point is that yoga, as you might know it, isn't really yoga. It's a bastardization of the real yogic system, which is not just the physical movements. In fact, it really isn't the physical movements. It's much more than that. But you go to the gym and, I have nothing against yoga at all, but I'm just saying that if you spoke to the gurus and in the yogic system who know what they're talking about, It's a totally different thing altogether. Right, I'll give you another example about costume. A good friend of mine called Michael, he passed away quite recently, he was around 85. He designed costume for probably every star of the 1980s, except Michael Jackson. He didn't do Michael Jackson. So Duran Duran, Rio, I'm Still Standing, Elton John, Queen, Radio Gaga, like literally Diana Ross, Tina Turner, and he was in some of the videos as well. He's a legend, Michael. We miss him. But I spoke to him for hours and hours and hours. He was very good to me. We spent a lot of time together. I actually interviewed him because I said, you need to let people know this. There was a costume that he made for Freddie Mercury, and some people online say that it's like, oh, Illuminati. He put an eye, it's got eyes all over it, the eyes, and he actually has an eye down there. And people misinterpret it. I know the full story of that costume and what it actually means. It is nothing like people say. What's the video? I'm forgetting the video. There's a costume, red tie, eyes all over, and eye down there. Michael was sitting at home, the phone rang, and it was Freddie Mercury. It was one of Freddie Mercury's assistants, actually, saying, a Rolls Royce is going to be picking you up in 2 hours. Be ready, have your passport. Okay, so he comes up to pick Michael. Michael, the next thing he knew, he's on a plane on his way to Munich. He's in the hotel in Munich, in the basement of the hotel, wherever it was. Freddie Mercury literally said, okay, Michael, design me something spectacular. Just like that. Sometimes in life, you just got to do it. And as I said to Michael, what did you think when he said that? And he's like, well, you sink or you swim. And I was just going to swim. So he came up he was the most beautiful artist, but he came up with a costume and he put eyes all over it, and the eye in the private part like that. And Freddie loved it. He really did. And he said, that is amazing. Let's make it. And he used it in his next video. So there's actually a story about that eye. I think it's a bit too rude for me to say on this blog. Let's just say that it's sexual innuendo. Let's put it that way. But it's been misinterpreted so much. I mean, I've seen the original artwork that he designed with the Munich hotel name at the bottom, and again, people just misinterpret it because they don't know the truth behind it. I try and speak to these people as another great example is staging. So one of the best stage designers ever, Mark Fisher. Oh, he has designed everything. There's no point in even saying he's designed everything. Michael Jackson Immortal World Tour, everything of Jean-Michel Jarre, U2, literally everything you've ever seen is basically, every big concert production is basically him. But I actually had a really, really long conversation with him about stage design and about the themes within that he incorporates. We talked on Tottenham Court Road at midnight. He had his pad and he was just drawing Gothic buildings or Georgian buildings. And even though he was probably the best stage designer in the world, in the middle of the night, he was in Tottenham Court Road sketching buildings for inspiration. What an amazing man. He's passed away now. But people say that his artwork, again, like Pink Floyd, is Illuminati as well. Well, I think it's just a case of ignorance. You don't have the educational... No, that's the wrong way to put it. It's just a case of you don't understand the signs and the symbols and what they mean. There's nothing inherently bad about them. It's just something which elicits a response within you, and that's what art is. It's simple as that. That is the great thing about art. There is darkness and there is light. Simple as that. Some people forget that. It's equal. It's not all light. And also, something that he designed affected a friend of mine. Years ago, we were watching La Défense, a Jean-Michel Jarre production, and there's a piece called Magnetic Fields 2, and they projected images onto buildings in Paris. And in the beginning of Magnetic Fields, there is a massive cobra that comes up 300 feet high, 300 feet at least. And then it's, weird scales going on, and then it turns into a hypnotic circle, and my friend said, I remember watching this years ago, and he goes, turn it off. And I'm like, what? He's like, turn it off. This is, I can't remember the word he used, but he basically said it's satanic. It's like, satanic. And I was thinking to myself, wow, that's his perception of it. A cobra and some scales. That's the bottom line. But I think it's genius. We all, somewhere inside us, from the ancient of days, are probably scared of king cobras. Some of these can go 6 feet high, stand up like the height of a man, open their hood. That is scary. We've all seen that video, The Snakes in the Pit, on the internet. But the point is, though, that Jean-Michel Jarre's genius, using that imagery, it is going to elicit a response inside you. Maybe it will be a subconscious evoking of fear. But that doesn't make it satanic. It just makes it of he knows how to push your buttons. And Michael Jackson was exactly the same. And that is the genius of great artists. Mark Fisher, people like that, they just had such a knowledge of classics, literature, theology, and so did, Michael, the costume designer. We spoke for hours. About theology because they put that into their art, which is why it touches you. And that's the genius of great artists, great musicians. That's the genius of it. Right at the end of this today, I'm going to put a little bit from the preface of my book. I'm not promoting the book. I don't care. Please don't buy it. Don't nothing. I think it's out of print 10 years ago. We had it, so don't worry about that. I'm just going to put it there so you can hear, because I talk about the similarities between, not the similarities, but the channeling of certain things that makes something aesthetically pleasing. I'll put it at the end. And Michael Jackson was probably one of the greatest artists. He was not stupid. Look at him in Las Vegas. He's in the shop and living with Michael Jackson, and he walks past a picture, and the picture, by the way, was by Francis Géladon. It is actually, I think that's a photo. I don't think it's not actually a painting as such, and it's actually of a marble statues, and they were commissioned by the Sun King, Louis XIV, for the Versailles Palace in 1666, or maybe a little bit before. It was started work in 1666. The Sun King commissioned Francis to make the Apollo and the nymphs. Apollo, as you know probably, was Zeus's son, and the Sun King, the god of the sun. So, I mean, there is a lot of symbology there, but that's the point. That's the beauty of it. And Michael was just going past that picture, and he says, I want it. He goes, I've actually got a bigger than life size. And to this day, it's still in Versailles. I think it's in the Grotto of Thetis. To this day, you can actually go and see it. But Michael Jackson knew that just by walking past. He wasn't silly. You can't be stupid and be the top, biggest entertainer for decades. It is impossible. Trust me on that one. So, and you can see that. And then the manager says, Michael knows his art. And trust me, that knowledge of art, that knowledge of classics, that knowledge of literature informed him and made him a better artist. And he put it in his art, and it is there for all to see. Intentional mystery is in nearly all of Michael Jackson's art. The Dangerous album cover. That is for you to decode and to interpret. Mark Ryden designed it and painted it over 6 months, full of symbology. But again, he's not going to explain it to you. If you know history and you know theology, you could probably work out some of it. But the point is, it's very easy to misinterpret, and that's the problem. People misinterpret and they make wild theories. A lot of people say, oh, Aleister Crowley's in on the cover. That's not Aleister Crowley, that's P.T. Burnham. He's a show business guy, maybe a bit of a politician. It's not Aleister Crowley. So, but the point is, it's all good. That it makes you ask the question, and that is the whole point of art. Michael instructed him, he knew what he was going to get when he employed that artist. But the point is, though, if you don't have the knowledge of what you are seeing, it's very easy to misinterpret. Some analyses of the dangerous cover are wild, and you just know straight away that they don't know what they're talking about. But fine, that's their interpretation, and they don't know what they're talking about, but so be it, that's life. We move on. I say bravo to Michael Jackson for making us ask questions about his art, just to make it interesting. There is some beautiful depth there. Of course there is. Take a look at Dangerous, Blood on the Dance Floor, Invincible, History Tour, intro, full of allegory. Thriller, Ghosts, Hand Signs, military regalia, armor, moonlight, thriller. And this is it. He talks about bathing in the moonlight. What is he saying when he says that? What is he meaning? He means something by that. Billie Jean, 40 days and for 40 nights. Obviously, it's a biblical reference. He taps in to all of these things. You need to, if you really want to know, you need to educate yourself in the way that he educated himself, and then you can see what he was referring to. But the beauty of it is art. That is what art is. So don't misinterpret and believe wildness about it being this and Satanism and blah, 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 because those people don't know what they're talking about. They really don't. And they can't prove intention, or they certainly don't have context. Bottom line, context, proof. You need to know. You can't just make wilds and say this person was this person was that. It just doesn't work. But on the other hand, just because someone has a different view to you doesn't make them crazy. Maybe they're just lazy, they haven't done the work, maybe they haven't read. A lot of people quote, but I would say, don't quote people. Unless you're an academic or a lawyer, what's the point? Most people that quote, they haven't even read the book they're quoting from, yet they're an expert. It's just absolute foolishness. It really is. Make it your business. If you're going to make a statement about Michael Jackson doing a mudra, find out what he's doing. And then you'll realise, oh, actually, he's not doing a mudra. And also, you need to look at the context of Michael Jackson's work, for example, and other artists. A lot of artists are for opening other people's eyes. And Michael Jackson was certainly one of those. So, bravo, Michael Jackson. Today's been a crazy one. I know we've just been covering a lot of subjects. And I hope you enjoyed. And see you soon. I'm going to leave an audio of a preface of my book because it talks about the correlation between the unseen and art. You might find it interesting. Preface. I've always asked myself, when looking at great artists perform or at an amazing piece of art, music or architecture, what is it that makes it or them so special? What is it that differentiates that person from the rest? Do they have a supernatural ability or a connection to something greater that we will never know? Or is it a talent that can be learned? When we see a painting by Leonardo da Vinci or hear an amazing piece of music by Beethoven, we see and hear near perfection that leaves us awestruck. But where does the magic that we all recognize as genius come from? Could it be a particular age or demographic? It would seem that it's something more than learning a particular skill and practicing a lot. The magic comes from the unique individual. The magic flows through them, and it is they who are the key to unlocking that potential. They possess a particular mindset or belief and a unique way of looking at themselves and the world. So, before a musical note, a dance step, or any kind of conceivable expression is executed physically in the world, it is firstly an expression of who you are mentally, spiritually, and physically. The physical execution, although essential, is the last in the chain, and it is the physical action that is the easiest to replicate and duplicate. The other parts take some understanding, effort, and thought. For example, before carrying out the execution of a dance step, it is of utmost importance that we understand our own intentions so that we can convey that step effectively to others to appreciate and admire in physical form. It's the great artists that execute a step, or the mesmerizing singer who hits the right note, who understand that a physical act is by no means the whole story. I'm talking about passion, belief, and understanding. Of course, with training and repetition, you can program somebody to physically move in a certain way. However, there will always be the exceptional few that have something extra, that magic that is clear to see. This is something that is missing from the solely physical thinking person who may believe that by schooling alone you can master your craft. I'm talking about the difference between a true dancer and somebody that can move their body. I'm talking about the lasting artist who inspires and gives hope, as opposed to one who entertains briefly and is soon forgotten. There's a big difference. The difference is down to the artist, who they are, how they think, and what they stand for. An artist is an artist all of the time. A star is born a star. It's just a case of rediscovering who you really are, understanding yourself, and working hard to perfect your skill, whatever that may be. It is an essential for all artists. So before you start on that journey, it makes sense to think about who you are, what you stand for, and how can you best be yourself. After that, it's simply a case of just letting the magic flow through you. Dance Like the Stars Book 1 is essentially a combination of articles and blog posts that I wrote during the latter part of 2006. My primary aim was for the book to serve as an accompaniment for any artistic thinking person in the psychological process of physical expression, as well as how to think like an artist and a unique person. Dancing is just a physical expression of who you are, and if you want to become a better dancer or a better thinker, the rules are the same through every area of your life, ranging from individuality to self-perspective to the execution of a precise dance step. I have started with Book 1 to look at what I believe are the most important aspects of the true artistic expression. Firstly, trying to understand who we are as individuals as well as artists, and secondly, how to convey who we are to others through the physical movement of our body. After thinking about our mental processes and trying to understand who we are, it's important not to forget that we convey this through our physical body. A large part of this book takes a look at the nutritional and health so that we can perform to our optimum level. My primary aim through this book is to encourage you to think about yourself as an individual and the way in which you express yourself to the world. Not to teach you to dance or to teach you anything at all, just for you to think about yourself and where you are going, and possibly give you a little encouragement to trust in yourself and express yourself in your own unique way. Do with this book as you please, as it's yours after all. Take your marker and highlight portions, skip the health bits if you want, start at the back and work forwards even. You're free to pick and choose whatever bits you feel are relevant and helpful for you, just as you are free to try something new and to finally get working on yourself, your goals and your dreams. It is never too late for that. The ancients, while navigating the high seas, used to look to the stars for guidance and direction. They would use the constellations to plot their course through the rough seas and stormy weather. Even with clouds and pouring rain, hope would return with the clear skies and with it clear direction, renewed hope and safety. Likewise, the ancient Egyptians who influenced the world we live in beyond measure were highly proficient in computing the power of the planets, luminaries, and constellations and the interactions between them. As they looked up, they believed, as did the Greeks and civilizations before them, that it was these heavenly bodies which had an effect upon the destinies of nations as well as individuals. It was the stars they looked up to and regarded as living things that influenced us. Today, we still look up to the stars for guidance, fashion tips, and inspiration. Pop stars, superstars, and so-called talented people, seemingly unreachable up on the billboards and on television, out of our grasp. People placed in positions, adored, and ready to be knocked down or carted off to rehab. It's amazing how much power and influence the few wield over the masses. Pythagoras himself, the first philosopher,
considered the stars to be bodies that encase souls, minds, and spirits. It is clear that today, as we look up to our own pop idols and latest marketed talents and stars, we should ask ourselves, are they really worthy of being emulated and adored? Should we not instead focus our energies on expressing ourselves to the best of our own abilities? Surely, this is far healthier than trying to complete a near impossible task and mimic those who we place up on the mantelpiece ready at any point to be knocked down, revealing themselves to be just as infallible as the rest of us. These are not only philosophical questions, but are most relevant for the artists, dancers, actors, musicians, and entertainers among us all. The true artists that will at least strive to be the best that they can be, the artists that dig deeper, those who understand it is harmony that is a prerequisite of beauty, that the beautiful poem, dance, song, piece of music, or expression is only so when its parts are harmonious. The message is clear. You will have to search for yourself, if you want to find that harmonious combination that will raise you up to the next level as an artist and as a person. Search you for yourself. Some might ask, what has philosophy and self-knowledge got to do with modern pop culture and practical advancement of their dancing, singing, acting, songwriting, and performing? I would say that anybody who asks that question is not ready for the answer, as it would be of no use to them. Instead of turning on the television or immersing oneself in temporary pop culture for inspiration and direction, would it not make sense at least to take a look at the real teachers who created the whole system that we live in today? Budding musicians and serious songwriters might, for example, find out exactly who's credited with the discovery of the diatonic scale, the foundation of every piece of music that we listen to. Who was it that coined the word tone? Who pondered upon the laws of consonance and dissonance for years? Who understood and explained them? They might discover who first understood and explained the amazing and often overwhelming effect of sound and music on the senses and our emotional state, i.e., music and its power to influence the mind and body. It is clear that even the modern greats like Madonna, Michael Jackson, or Paul McCartney are not going to give you a blank stare if you talk about the details of their craft, because they understand the importance of knowledge. And if you want to be as great as them, then you should be looking in that direction too. They would know how the Druids used melody to heal, as they believed it soothed the physical body as well as the soul. How they also believed that the strings of their harps were tuned to the planets, and why. This, in turn, might be of interest to the curious actor or student of English and drama, especially one that has read The Merchant of Venice, for example. A different perspective on what the author actually meant when writing, "There's not the smallest orb which thou beholdst, but in his motion like an angel sings." That same line of the Shakespearean play might become even more interesting to the theologian when we look towards the reference works and the works of Job, when he described a time when the stars of the morning sang together. It is quite clear. Art, music, philosophy, theology, and culture are all linked, and the true artist should learn from them all. But let's leave that for another day and look towards dance right now. So don't forget, you are an individual. Follow your own path and your own dreams of your own choosing. Always ask questions. Search for your own truth. Express yourself in as a unique way as possible. And I'll leave you with the wisest words that I have ever heard from a teacher, the words of the first philosopher, Pythagoras. Know thyself. Anthony King, London, England, March 15th, 2007.